Good morning, everyone. Thanks for introducing me. Just a little bit of background about myself and the company. My name is Abhishek. I'm the Chief Digital and Data Officer for RGE. For those of you who are not familiar with RGE, we are a conglomerate of different businesses, mostly traditional businesses. As you can see from the backdrop here, we manage a lot of plantations. We are in the pulp and paper business. We are in the palm oil business, viscose, and clean energy business. So we are a diversified conglomerate of multiple different kinds of businesses. Now, of course, in terms of the topic for this morning, this is quite interesting, right? Which is, how do you get the chief digital officer to kind of generate revenue for the company? And before we get into the details, I think just a little bit of so-called background about how these conversations go, right? So I got appointed in this role about 5 years ago. This is my 5th year running. And one of the first things which I think most of us as CDOs, CIOs, we have to face is, you go into the boardroom and they ask you, right, what is your plan? What is your strategy? And at that forum, at the board level, if you are addressing a group of board of directors or shareholders and you tell them that I'll bring about digital transformation, I will do agile practices, I will do data analytics, artificial intelligence, computer vision, for them, that's really not anything of interest, right? At the end of the day, when we talk to the board, for them, the real thing is, how does this generate value? How are you going to help my business create value, right? So a lot of technical terminologies and a lot of grunt work, which we do on a day-to-day basis to make things happen, and where we feel that we have accomplished a lot and where we feel that a lot of our time and effort goes, by the time you hit the boardroom, those conversations are pretty mute. They are not interested in that. They just want to hear more around the value part. So in the very early days, when we were setting up the digital transformation for the group, and we are traditional business, right? We are not even close to consumers, forget about e-commerce. So we are not even in the consumer business, we are B2B. So for us, when in the early days we were setting up the digital transformation agenda, it was really a very tough conversation at the board level, which is to say, how do you create value? And right at the beginning, in the very first year of my job, I realized that when talking to the board level, you have to break down the value conversation into an offensive defensive approach. So you have to take that so-called segmentation of how do you create value in a two-speed model. Now, what is the offensive defensive mode? I think in the earlier part of the morning, we heard from some of our panelists and speakers, and how do you go about creating value in terms of productivity, in terms of cost optimization, in terms of having KPIs, in terms of creating that productivity for your staff, right? That's more of a defensive conversation where you say, how do I protect the business? How do I take what you're doing today and I help the company do it better, faster, and maybe at a higher profitability? And then there's an offensive approach, which is, how do I disrupt? How do I do new things? How do I do maybe something entirely different at the back of what we have as today's assets, and at the back of what is our core competency to begin with? And we have to have this conversation of so-called offensive defensive while staying very close to your core competency. So it's not like we can say that, today you are a B2B business, let's become a B2C business. We set up an e-commerce shop tomorrow and will become as big as Shopee, for example, right? I think that's a very frivolous conversation. So you have to do all that in the light of focusing on your core competency. So an offensive defensive model, but at the back of your core competency. Now for us, that meant that we had to take stock of what are our value drivers, what are our core competencies. And in our scenario, we did a prioritization. So we said we'll do the defensive work a little earlier, and then we will get into the offensive. And this is a little bit tactical and a little bit strategic as well. Tactical because you are setting off new. So you are not really sure whether you'll get it right. You don't know whether the team will perform, what kind of skills you need on the team, what is in-source, what is outsourced, what is to be done by yourself, what you buy from the market, right? So a little bit of tactical. And strategic because you also want a little bit of time to study the market, right? But you don't want to sit around wasting too much time studying the market and not delivering results. So in that sense, and if I may have the next slide, please. What we did was we developed a value framework. And that value framework, in a way, we said will be, because we are in the manufacturing industry, and those of you who are from the manufacturing background will know a familiar term called QPC, quality, productivity, and cost. So our value framework is an enhanced version of traditional manufacturing QPC framework. So the digital framework of value for us was RQPCR, which is revenue, quality, productivity, cost, and risk. A little bit of, again, defensive and a little bit of offensive. Some to increase revenue, some to decrease cost and risk. Now, this framework we developed was to create the business value, but at the same time, the focus was always on having the two-speed, which is offensive and defensive. The things which are defensive here are obviously quality, productivity, cost, and risk. These are to protect your existing business. These are to kind of digitize your core, but at the same time, make sure you make more money with the current assets, with the current technology, with the current people that you have on the ground. Coming again from the manufacturing world, we borrowed two more concepts. One is the philosophy of continuous improvement. So we said that we don't have to get it right on day one. So we will do something right, and then we will build on top of it. So that continuous improvement in our company was being done using a lean philosophy called Kaizen. Some people do Six Sigma, some people do Kaizen. So we borrowed the Kaizen methodology and we married that with the agile principles of digital. And we said we will start small, we'll do something, add value. And as we continue to add value, we will build on top of that. And the easiest place to add value is usually the aspect of risk. Risk is the easiest place to add value, and cost, right? And I'll come to that in a second. So that's what we said we will do as part of our first value driver. And we'll prove to the organization that digital can be used in a manufacturing setting to drive value. Now, at the same time, this was being done on the back of the philosophy of continuous improvement. So we borrowed something which the company or the group was already familiar with. We built on top of that. We added the agile principle, and we said this is how we will do the value realization. So that became the first thing. The second thing which we did from a change management perspective was from day one, we said there will be absolutely no focus on manpower reduction, right? We are a 60,000 people organization. And one of the things which we learned very early on was, and I think most of the people in the room will probably understand what I'm saying, digital transformation success is on the back of people buying into it at all levels. It cannot be top-down approach. It cannot be a CDO-driven approach. It cannot be even a CEO-driven approach, right? It has to be people accepting it at all levels. So from day one, we said there will be absolutely no attrition because of digital transformation. And that kind of made it much easier for us to get participation from the business. So two things we did. We borrowed an existing concept. So we came to some common grounds, which we were able to understand with the business, and the business could understand with us. And we used that common grounds to then build on the easiest aspect, which was risk. And we did that by saying that there will be absolutely no attrition. So if we identify some opportunities, there will be absolutely no attritions. And on the risk side, of course, the easiest bits were to do, for example, sustainability, which is environmental, or financial risk, reputational risk, or human safety, right? So just to pick one example, financial risk is quite easy to do because you can always say that if we do this, we will prevent fraud, right? So in our case, we picked up the area of procurement and we came up with 2 or 3 transformation programs which will prevent any sort of fraud in the area of procurement. And that was quite an easy sell. And the fact that we said we will do it without any sort of attrition, and the fact that we'll do it continuously improving over time, made sure that we had a pipeline of investment and we had no resistance from people. So we were able to do that on the defensive side. Now, if I may have the next slide, please. But the more important thing was, how do we then scale it up? So then we scaled it up into operational excellence, which is your whole digital manufacturing. And then we said we will do productivity, cost, efficiency. Of course, we are a manufacturing company, so we have to do smart factory. We have to do KPIs. And this is where we started building business cases, and we said, okay, $3.5 million savings and 17 KPIs and so on and so forth. But all this was, again, improving profitability for the group, but the revenue would stay the same, right? Not really adding revenue. So eventually, and again, next slide, please. We then, once we got the profitability conversation very stable with the board, and we were able to show that we will manage the risk for the company, we will manage the profitability for the company, and we'll be able to deliver those results, is when we started having revenues with digital first approach. Now this slide is in a way bottom to top, and I will start from the bottom first. So what we said was, we have an existing set of products, and how do we take these existing set of products and existing set of channels to make new money, right? So that's your first approach. So in our context, we are in the pulp and paper business. So we said one of our existing products is printing paper, and one of our existing channels is B2B, business to business. So we sell our printing papers through distributors. So what is the first revenue opportunity that we have for our company? We said B2B commerce, right? That's a very, very low hanging fruit, very easy to plug. So one of the early things we did was we built a B2B commerce website. And this is sometimes, like they say, timing is also important. It just so happened that we were talking about B2B e-commerce for printing paper at the start of 2020. In late 2019. And in a way, then we got hit by the pandemic, and that just brought more investment into this project. And all of a sudden, we were asked to do this project in 2 months' time, something which we were planned for about 6 to 9 months' time. The very fact that things were getting locked down and physical meetings were not so easy to happen made this project a real priority for the whole group. And we brought it up in double quick speed. And we launched this platform called April Connect. April is one of our companies. It is one of the leading manufacturers of printing paper in this part of the world and in North Asia. And we launched the B2B e-commerce there. Now, of course, once you have kind of taken care of existing channels, the next question becomes is, what are the new channels? And obviously, for us, once we had the flavor of e-commerce coming into the group, or B2B e-commerce coming into the group, we said, now can we also use existing marketplaces? And especially more so for us in China, where we make a good percentage of our revenue. So we then started building what we call OMS systems, actually buying OMS systems and connecting our so-called inventory management systems, which we had built for our e-commerce solution, to third-party e-commerce solutions like JD.com and Taobao.com in China. So in that sense, we ended up connecting e-commerce for our product first through existing channels, which is our distributors, and then to new channels. And of course, here we were hugely helped by the timing of it all, right? Because we were all going into lockdown, and e-commerce was booming, and we were greatly helped by that. But the fact that we tried it and we were ready for it just before the lockdown happened meant that we were able to unlock substantial revenues for the group. And I'm quite happy to say that as far as the group is concerned, we did not see any drop in our revenues during the pandemic. In fact, if anything, our revenue actually slightly went up. Of course, commodity prices and all also helped, but the fact that we were digitally ready for all sorts of channels and sales conversations helped a lot. So that was for existing product. But then you say, okay, now that we have done it for existing products, am I also able to do new products? So that becomes your second area of focus. This is where another area which we were looking at, which is new products in our so-called viscose fiber stream, where we launched a traceability product called Follow Our Fiber. Now, of course, for whether it is pulp and paper or whether it is viscose fiber, sustainability is a very, very big thing. So what we've done is we've launched a fiber which can be traced from the origin, which is the plantation, all the way to the end consumer. Once the finished product like a shirt or a end consumer goods is manufactured and sold to the consumer. So this ability to track this end-to-end supply chain of value chain of the product was built on the back of a digital solution, which is on blockchain. And we created that using followOurFiber.com. Now, I'm sure you guys over the last 2 years have followed similar stories where a lot of companies have pivoted and they've created new products. AirAsia.com is no different. Changi pivoted from just running the airport to iShop Changi becoming a core focus of their revenues during the last 2 years. And that will continue to stay, right? So I think a lot of businesses over the last 2 years, they created new products and using existing channels for kind of selling their new products. But then you also can talk about new products and new channels. So this is an area in our context, for example, as RG, we don't have a consumer product till recently. We've never had a consumer product. But now we are entering the personal care space, whether it's in the form of what you call the wet tissue or the sanitary wipes. And we feel that given the huge boom over the last couple of years, tissue paper and all this is going to be growing in size in terms of demand. And this makes a good place for us to launch a consumer brand. And this time round, rather than doing the traditional route of B2B and then B2C or B2B2C, we've kind of taken an approach of direct to consumer. So we've, again, in that sense, digital first, direct to consumer approach here. It will be sold in China on our website, on e-commerce websites, heavily advertised using social media, using social influencers, and not the traditional advertising route. So the entire conceptualization of this product and the way we sell it, the way we market it, the way we monetize it and make money out of it is pretty much digital first approach. And that's something which we are now working on. That brings me to the last part of how do you make revenues with digital first, where if you do the first two successfully, and of course these two in itself is a multi-year journey, the last one which becomes a real possibility is your new business opportunity, right? Where you create digital ventures. I think that's the thing which is becoming quite common now these days. And I have a couple of examples on the screen. Jiva, which has been launched by Olam, and Navix, which has been launched by Schneider Electric. These have all been launched in the last year or so. They are both as a service platforms. Jiva is a farmer services platform, and Navix is utilities for data center platform, right? And these are new business opportunities, and these become possible for chief digital officers and chief data officers to propose to their board to work in collaboration with their existing product teams and platforms to spin off new businesses. And this is really becoming the new trend. In fact, EDB is sponsoring a lot of these initiatives over the last year or so. And a good number of these digital ventures have been launched, and a good number of consultants are now operating in this part of our geography to facilitate such venture creation. So I think with that, I would just summarize by saying that we in the world of digital, of course, there's a lot of technical challenges that we have to solve. But at the end of the day, we have to bring it back to the value when we deal with the board, when we deal with shareholders. And in terms of value, we have that offensive defensive approach, where the defensive way is to talk about quality, productivity, cost, and risk. But the real offensive way is how do you create new revenue, whether it is from existing products, new products, or maybe even spinning off new entities. So with that, I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek. I think we've got a couple of questions on Slido. First one is, how could you promise no attrition when productivity gains materialize?
Okay, so this one I have an unfair advantage. Most of my manpower tends to be in China and Indonesia, right? So the manpower cost is really not that high, right? Now, in that sense, when we build a business case, we invariably leave out the savings of manpower. So we build a business case on the back of productivity gains, which means that increased production, not reduced manpower, or cost gains, which is either reduction in terms of chemical or raw material, but again, not manpower. So when we build a business case, we very intentionally leave out manpower cost, and that's why it becomes quite easy for us to promise no attrition. Now, of course, if you are operating in Europe or North America, it will be a different story.
Absolutely. Second one is, why did you just launch in 2 months instead of the planned 7 to 8 months?
This was just through market pressure, right? Because everything in the physical world was getting into the lockdown mode. So we had no choice but to expedite the B2B commerce for our sales team. There was no other way to sell.
Understand. Thank you, Abhishek. That was very insightful.